The intellectual life is the only life that makes good use of leisure, of idleness. Now, this concept comes to us from this book, The Intellectual Life, and it is a very good assessment, I believe, of idleness and leisure, because the person who is not an intellectual, who cares not for any high thinking, cannot spend their idle time wisely. You know, Newton, as the story goes, was at leisure, was at idleness. From anyone looking around would have said, Isaac Newton right now is doing absolutely nothing. He is doing no work. He is going to provide nothing to society. And an apple fell on his head and he provided much to society. And that was an intellectual at leisure. That is what an intellectual at leisure has the capability of doing. One who loves thinking highly and deeply, and is well versed in literature, in philosophy, and books of high quality, of high thinking. Now, I don't know what position you may think you are in to be an intellectual if you have no right, you have no cause, there's just no way you think you could do it. And I would like to I would like you to throw away those self-limiting beliefs, because I didn't read a book outside of school, which even then I never read a book. Really, I think the only book I ever actually read was like Hatchet and The Adventures of Edward Tulane, which is, child's play. Those are books you could read in a couple hours. And yeah, and I think those are the only books I ever really read up to 20. And as you can see, I have a lot of books around me. And after the age of 20, I decided, I was in a special needs reading class. I have self-diagnosed dyslexia. And, if you told me at 19 years old I was going to be, I'm not an intellectual, but be pursuing an intellectual life and being pursuing philosophy, uh, good literature, writing, posting videos of this nature, I would have called you crazy. And I would have said, there is no way I can do that. I'm not smart enough. I don't care enough. I don't like thinking, I'm not creative enough. All of those things would have left my lips. And if those are similar to the things in your head telling you that you cannot pursue a life of this nature, then I would encourage you to just try and just see. Because truly, how else, if you're not intellectual, I don't think you can even, I don't even think leisure and idleness is a possibility for you. I mean, how many people can really just sit there for 4 hours with their thoughts? You know, how many people nowadays can sit there for 4 hours without their phone, without scrolling on social media, without texting somebody, without calling somebody, without going to try to make plans to hang out with somebody later? Who can do that? I think only the high thinker, only the intellectual who has things that they want to pursue in their idleness, in their leisure, things they want to think through, wisdom they want to obtain, fields they want to advance, things they want to remember and hold to memory so that they can call upon them when the time needs to improve their quality of life. And that is kind of the point of the intellectual life. It's a almost a guide to how to live the intellectual life and why it's fruitful and why, and I say the intellectual life with the book I showed at the beginning of the video. It's a guide, and it tells you how to do it, why you should do it, and everything in between. And And I think a life doing is not worth being. A life solely doing is not worth being. And the only way to truly be, I think, is to be somewhat of an intellectual. Now, even if you're someone who meditates, I think in a certain way you are an intellectual. You are in love with philosophy. For the definition of philosophy is, the love of wisdom, the pursuit of wisdom. And I just see I just see this day and age breeding so few intellectuals, and that is detrimental, I believe, in multiple ways, but I believe mostly in the way of how we spend our free time. Nobody is endeavoring to increase their knowledge in any field that they find interesting, it seems. It's just everyone's content with a superficial understanding. How many Christians have no idea, have no concept of theology, who have no concept of the Trinity, of God's presence versus God's energies, who haven't read Saint Saint Augustine, who haven't looked into Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologia. And these aren't things you have to do to be go to heaven and be a good Christian. I mean, but to me it's like, why would you not? Why do you not care? Why your idleness could be spent more fruitfully, delving into these interesting things. Or if you love philosophy, why are you not reading, Plato or Aristotle? Or, if you enjoy discipline and the pursuit of mental fortitude, why are you not trying to read the Stoics? Why are you not trying to advance your intellect so your free time spent at leisure is valuable and you can think about profound things? You can come to profound understandings, and you can further your knowledge by understanding. For knowing things is overrated, but understanding them is truly fruitful. And I see it, whenever I'm in public, in a waiting room, getting food, doing anything in public, everyone's on their phone. I'm at the gym and everyone's just sitting on their phone in between sets. I'm at a waiting room at the doctor's office and everyone's on their phone. No one can just sit there for 5 to 10 minutes and think, because no one has done thinking. No one's thought in forever. They have nothing to think about. They don't, and you also, they don't, we don't pursue so often anything worth thinking about. But when you just got done reading, Plato's Republic, and then you have to go to a waiting room for 30 minutes, I mean, you got something to think about. You got something to ponder. You got something to try to understand better. You got something to say, how can I apply this to my life and better my life? And I believe there's fruit in that. And there's attention and there's focus, which is fruitful in itself. Deep attention and deep focus are fruitful in themselves. That is why it always feels good after, your long day of hard work. It feels like it goes by fast. You might not have loved the work, but there's something that feels good about it because you were focused and attentive to it. And there was dopamine and fruit in that. And yeah, it's beneficial in and of itself. But the person who is not an intellectual, the person who doesn't care for reading, for writing, for learning, they have nothing to do in their free time but pass it by as quick as possible. I remember when I was younger, I would, I'd be like 30 minutes before dinner, and it would just be, how can I waste this 30 minutes as fast as possible? What can I watch? Can I watch some, regular show, some SpongeBob, like what can I watch for 30 minutes? What game, how many COD matches can I play? It's like two multiplayer matches. All right, let's go play 2 games of COD real quick. It's like you just you're in this. I think that's another thing too, when you're not, and I say intellectual life, and I don't want that to daunt you. I don't want that to seem like something hard or something only a select few can do. If it's humanly possible, it's possible for anyone. And I don't believe the intellectual life is, except for, there's a small number of unfortunate people who truly cannot think at that high of a level. And obviously, I mean, if you're one of those people, I don't think you're consuming this video right now. But I'm obviously there's certain people who cannot, are going to have no chance at understanding, Plato's Republic and the metaphors in it. And there's people who are going to have no chance in understanding, Thomas Aquinas. I mean, I don't even understand Thomas Aquinas. So, I mean, that's not saying much because I don't understand much, but you get the point. But chances are, if you're watching this, then you are not one of those people. And if you do think that you are, and you have a misconception of what it means to be an intellectual, and you have a self limiting belief system that is not serving you, and you should discard. And if you think you don't have time, you do have time. Unless you truly don't have time. But if you watch more than, 10 hours of TV a week, that's a book you could read every week. If you listen to more than 10 hours of music in the car every week, that's an audiobook. That's 3, 4 podcasts. That's, you know, lectures, that Harvard, Yale, all those universities have lectures online nowadays. And there's podcasts of even higher intellectual quality. And there's audiobooks of great intellectual quality and great food for thought that you can think and ponder on for long times. And yeah, not everyone has time, but that's a small percentage. Say less than 1% actually don't have time. And chances are you're not in that percentile. Chances are you make time for trivial things instead of making time for meaningful things. And that's a decision you just have to make. But I don't think we should. I try to never allow myself to make the excuse I don't have time. Even if it's something, I really don't have time for because it's, long and, the time it takes place and all those factors. But I like saying, I guess for one to feel like I'm in control, but also to just understand that, if push came to shove, you could make time for it. To say that, I don't want to make time for that. No, I don't want to make time to, you know, learn the guitar. Not that I don't have time, but it's going to take a lot of time, so I don't want to make time for it. And it's going to take a lot of energy and all those things. It's like, not that I don't have time to learn a martial art, but at this moment in time, I don't want to make time for it. And that, gives you back control and then puts you in a place of saying, one day, if you want to change that, you're able to. And you're not held by a self limiting view of like, oh, I don't have time to do that thing. It's going to interrupt with my 2 hours of Netflix every night. It's going to interrupt with my, weekends watching football. You know, that's why I don't accept the notion that people don't have time because I see how people spend their time, and so few spend it wisely. But the main point of the video is that if you really want to spend your idle time in your leisure fruitfully, I think you almost have to be an intellectual. And if you are, then you could be someone like an Isaac Newton, who, an apple falls on his head and, gravity comes out of it. If he if he was an intellectual who thought leisure was unbeneficial, or if he wasn't an intellectual because he thought leisure was stupid and he was just do, he never would have been under the apple tree. He never would have been smart enough to understand what was happening under that apple tree. And we never would have we wouldn't have had that theory as soon as we did. Someone else, another intellectual at leisure would have had it, but not at that time, not at that place, and history would be different. And that's all because of one intellectual at leisure, just idly existing, and to the untrained eye would have been a lazy, good for nothing person. But the trained eye would have realized that if he's an intellectual, he is doing God's work. He's doing higher work than most men